Ordinary means of grace our people are fine with, but the centrality of corporate worship in the Christian life, they struggle with, particularly the Lord's Day, morning and evening. Struggle with that, not because they don't want to come twice on the Lord's Day, as much as because how can that be as important as my private Bible study, my personal devotion? Yep. How can that be as important? That sounds like you ministers of the Word are more important to my growth in Christ than my own private devotion.
It's tough for an evangelical.
And by the way, they're right when they draw that inference. You are more important.
Yeah, but that's really hard for the evangelical who thinks in an anti-authoritarian, anti-institutional
church,
kind of view of things.
Egalitarian.
It's very democratic.
Yep.
The way evangelicalism is seen.
Lowercase d.
Yeah, and so you look at lowercase d. Thanks, Scott. So you very Republican, but very democratic. Lowercase d. Yeah. So I mean, when I interact with our folks, I think that they want me to prove.
Right.
You need to show me that. Like, where does it say that this Lord's Day worship is more important than my personal private Bible study?
Romans 10.
Right. Yeah. Well. Yeah. And so, right.
But it's not an easy concept for people.
That's right.
I mean, even so we're in a confessional Reformed church, and people still struggle with that concept.
Oh, sure.
I mean, this is not something you ever just get there and we've got it nailed down.
Pietism
You're always
is in the water.
teaching this.
Right. So what you're struggling with is pietism, that my personal experience and my personal private religion, which is important, is at the center of my Christian life, as opposed to gathering with the covenant community and, as it were, at the foot of Sinai and hearing from the Lord being at the center of my spiritual life. Those are two different paradigms. And moving people from the pietist paradigm to the Reformed covenantal paradigm is terribly difficult. I mean, we were all, to some degree or other, raised in it. I mean, that's the paradigm that I was initiated into when I became a Christian. And so to learn to see the Reformed approach to worship was very difficult, a real shock.
Well, and I think there's a misunderstanding out there that comes with that on a couple levels. It's not just the personal piety thing. That's one issue.
Yeah.
The other issue is that egalitarianism crosses over into things like what my church is going to struggle with, I think, over the next several years, trying to learn, and we're going to be patient with, is the idea that you mean that we should come to the elders and or stand up and take vows in front of the members before we're taking the Lord's Supper? Why can't my 6-year-old just take it as soon as I pop it in their mouth, right? Yeah. How come the elders have any say in that? Why don't I, as the parents, make that determination all by myself? I think that's hard for them to understand. When you're going through, let's say, a divorce, you and your spouse are about to split up. What do you mean the elders should weigh in on whether or not I have a right to go forward with this divorce? That seems like you guys are stepping into things that aren't your purview, and you have to show, no, actually that is.
A churchly Christian life, as opposed to an individual. So is church the expression, the collective or gathered expression of 300 individual experiences, or is church the beginning of the Christian life, when you're gathered as the covenant community, and that we live together as in covenant with each other, as a congregation, in submission to the visible church and her officers.
Yep.
So churchly Christianity is very difficult for Americans.
That's a hard pill to swallow, though.
Yeah.
And I'm learning right now, I don't know if you've seen this, Chris, pastorally, I'm starting to even tell my kids, who are in their 20s now, when you meet people who say they're Christians, find out if it's churchly.
Yeah.
Because actually in our cultural moment, that might be the clearest sign as to whether or not they're serious about their faith.
Yeah. I mean, Scott and I have been talking a lot about cultural Christianity, and this is a big issue. You're right. It's detached from the local church and the importance of the church. I always find that I can kind of disarm them when I have evangelicals coming in who are nervous about that, especially that vow. Do you promise to submit to the elders who are promising to oversee your souls and your lives? We're promising before God to care for them and shepherd them and love them. They have not experienced that
No, that's
so
right.
This is a new concept that kind of disarms that actually these guys are for me. They're not there to beat me up.
That's right.
They're there to shepherd and love me, you know?
That's right. This isn't prison, and the elders are not prison guards. This is family, and these men who are taking these vows are vowing to love you and protect you, shepherd you, care for you, and
not
to
just the
serve
CEO figure that they've never got to know.
Well, that's right. If your pastor is an entertainer, who's 300 yards away or mainly on a screen, and you wouldn't dare. And I've had this conversation with people. I've had this thought myself. When I first went into a Reformed church, the minister was not someone that you talked to because he was the guy who was in the entertainer. In a
Forget
sense.
that Jesus walked among the masses, but that's another.
The big show, right? He's the big guy. He's the star of the show. So you could see the youth pastor, or the associate pastor, or something.
Yeah, there was a hierarchy,
but not the or your group leader, your small group leader, but not the pastor because he's the guy.
But even the elders now to appreciate their role in this, because even in the Baptist model, I mean, I was stunned years ago walking into a Baptist church and they didn't have any elders, and they have the deacons and the pastor. I said, I don't know how that works. Now that's not across the board in Baptist churches. I understand that. But the Baptist churches that I was exposed to, there was no concept even of the eldership.
No, the deacons sort of perform that.
In the circles I ran in, most of the circles I ran in were elder rule.
Right.
The Reformed,
I know.
And the Confession Reformed Baptist guys are like elder-led congregational rule.
Yeah.
So they do have elders. But I agree with you. I would say that we were often taught, and in our church planting circles, when I was in Acts 29, we were taught in our church planting circles, you don't have time for the average member as the pastor. You've got this big church to build, to grow. Mm-hmm. You pick the high-level leaders who are going to help grow this
with your
thing
vision.
with you, with your vision, and you put your time into them. Just like Jesus put his time into the 12 and, especially the 3, you put your time into these high-level leaders.
These CEO guys, these ranchers, they're never preparing to go to the cross.
Correct. They're not. And they're also not walking among the masses the way that Christ, they're in a green room. So, I'm not kidding. They're literally in a green room.
They're screened up there.
Yeah.
What you mean? Yeah.
Sometimes they filmed their sermons during the week. I knew pastors who filmed their sermons during the week and then just showed it at their site so they could go on for weekend trips with their family. Yeah. But see what you could do, Chris, with all this equipment.
I see Chris.
You gave me an idea here.
Yeah, the wheels are turning.
That was actually happening. But that's the model, and I think, well, there's some truth to the notion that I need to put time into up-and-coming elders, deacons, and ministers of the word.
Right.
I need to put maybe a majority of my time in there. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't mean that I also don't need to know the sheep I'm helping shepherd, right? Exactly. As part of this team.
Celebrity is not an office in the church.
Celebrity is not an office in the church. I tell people that the reason they should submit to the elders is because their job's a little easier than ours. And they're like, what do you mean? Yeah. I said, well, we have a ministerial authority, not a magisterial one. We're not your kings.
Yeah.
We're your servants in accord with the word. But I have to stand before God and give an account for your soul.
Right. See, that's the concept we want them to appreciate. We're here to care for you.
Yeah.
Right? Shepherd you, love you, minister the word to you. That's life to you.
How many refugees from megachurches have said to you, have said to me, this is amazing. Dan Borvin wrote something for the Heidelberg some years ago. Yeah. My pastor knows my name.
Yeah.
And that just, when he became Reformed, that blew him away.
Our problem is that somewhat we get evangelicals in, and the Reformed thing's a new experience. Sure. They've been so programmed on experiential Christianity. They had this over here. They come in, wow, I had this dose of the means of grace today that I've never experienced in this new form of worship, and they really haven't understood it all yet, and they're in and out.
Well, they don't. Yeah, I mean, listen, if you're in process of becoming Reformed, you need to give yourself 6 months to detox.
That's right. You need a detox period.
And here's why I say detox, because you've been going to a mega church, and you've been doing the 30 minutes of praise music and whatnot, and 30 minutes of preaching, and a lot of it's been designed to create within you a certain kind of psychological, emotional experience, a sense of euphoria.
Right.
And you think that's worship, and you get whatever brain chemicals. I've had people say different things, but whatever the happy chemicals are. They give you that sense of euphoria.
Dopamine.
And so you think that's worship. And so you go to a Reformed church and you don't get the dopamine shot and you feel like you've been robbed. Well, we didn't worship. No, you didn't get the dopamine shot. That's what it means.
You first have to read Scott Clark, have them read you and get mad. They need to get mad, right? That's
where they
the
start.
Trajectory, right?
It's the confrontation. It's a confrontation. That's what happened, right? So I don't want to pick up the confrontation element and become Hegelian while we're talking, but so but yeah, it helped that I was confronted with what Scott was saying, because I think if you're a learner, if you're a real learner, when you're confronted with things you haven't considered before, you don't just write it off.
You have to stop and think.
You got to stop and think, and you have to think about all the implications of that and how it does it reorient so many different things. And reading Scott's blog back then for me was, it was shocking. It made me ticked off. I didn't know what to do with it.
Good for you that you kept reading, though.
I didn't understand all of it. Sure. Well, that was part of the reason I wanted to read it, because I thought, I don't understand what he's saying. So I need to read it a bunch of times until I start to figure out what this even means. And I sense that the implications were way bigger than I understood. Yeah. Because it's not just pietism, but the revivalism, the sense that the way we're going to grow the church is by looking like the world. And, and we're going to bring them in. If we have really cool rock concerts, and if I dress hipper, and I was never committed to that, by the way, just to be clear.
I was going to say.
I was never a hip dresser.
Bakersfield doesn't have good shopping.
Not one of the things I was known, but casual. In my case, casual. Somebody else might have been hipster. I was casual. But if we do these things, that's going to really bring them in. And the reason that Escondido URC isn't growing is because it's too Dutch, or it's too staid, or it's too whatever. And it's actually probably growing because it's a big old church. But you understand my point. I'm just picking that church out of the blue. So it's because of these things. And I want to say, actually, the only people clamoring for the rock music and the casual atmosphere aren't the unbelievers out there. Yeah. They think it's corny.
They do.
It's the baby boomer.
Yep, absolutely true.
Christian people who want a more comfortable church.
So this is where I was up north in my first call. The Reformed churches, it was all the baby boomer age were moving out. They bought out a shopping center and they started a Rick Warren Saddleback like church, and their kids didn't connect with that.
No,
and non-believers
their kids became Acts 29.
Yeah, they became Acts 29. Yeah. They lit candles,
exactly.
and then the non-believers weren't connecting with that. So
as a former non-believer. If ever I came across, some version of contemporary Christianity, it was in the 1970s. So I know what I would have thought, and this is just goofy.
Yeah.
The only thing that I wanted, as I became a Christian, is I wanted to know what the truth was.
Right.
And I wanted to know seriously, who is this Jesus? And what is he saying, and what does it mean, and how do I understand this?
And having a tradition and roots. I mean, that's my father-in-law. When we first, when I was proposing, to my wife, he had all kinds of concerns about this reform thing. He's evangelical. He didn't have anything. He did what you said. He was so frustrated at first, he went and grabbed Calvin's Institutes and read it cover to cover.
Mm. Oh, good for him.
I know. And that's what I know. I couldn't believe it.
What did he make of it?
If you look at him today, it's unbelievable how he's grown in understanding. He's a real history buff. But he had never been trained in any of this. He never had any of this. And once he realized the history was open to him, he loves the Reformed Church now. He loves coming here.
So one of the things I did as a young Christian was to read Calvin's Institutes, and I never looked back after that. That was a transformative 13 weeks. It took me 13 weeks to read the Institutes.
But it encourages people to be patient and thoughtful and look at the history. Look at what we're saying. Consider the arguments biblically and confessionally. Yeah. These confessions weren't written, just yesterday.
Going back to the young people, what young people want is they want us to stand up and tell them what we actually believe,
right,
and then stand behind it. Right.
Well, it's a joke. You're in a culture now where if you don't have a victim status, LGBTQ, whatever it is, if you don't have a victim status, then you're on the outs.
Yeah.
And so when you ask young people to come to serious churchly Christianity, not just spirituality, but churchly Christianity, when you're asking them to come to a place where they are now in the oppressor class. They're a part of the group of people who, white Christians, whatever. And I'm not saying we're all white, but you understand my point. And it's like, if I'm going to start making absolute truth claims about the nature of reality, who God is, what man is, what sin is, what I'm supposed to do with this body, the fact that it actually has authority over me and it's God-given.
Yeah, you're not
you start
autonomous.
talking about those things, and you're telling me that those young people who are going to face ridicule, potential persecution, being cut off from social groups, that if we just had a guy wearing the right pair of skinny jeans rocking a guitar, they'd go for that.
Yeah.
That's insane, right? It's insane.
Yeah.
It's just not true. I just want to say, I grew up in a pagan home, literally pagan. We had a high priestess named Veda, the whole thing. So like, not just sort of pagan. And I was invited to church by a Christian guy, friend of mine in elementary school, junior high, right, middle school age.
Yeah.
I was invited to church by him. I heard these truth claims about Christianity. I had Christian people when I was in high school, families intact, healthy Christian families inviting me into their home. And I thought, all of this is missing from my life. And that was compelling. I thought the music was hokey at the church.
Yeah.
I thought the people were old. It didn't matter because I wanted to know what happens when I die.
Yep.
And I wanted to know what life was for and what it was about. And I wanted to have families like these families who actually loved one another. And
the community.
Yeah.
Right.
And so I just, that's what brought me in. And I just want to tell Christian people, if you're at Escondido URC and you're wondering about how you reach your neighbors, invite them to church. It's remarkable. They're actually going to hear the gospel preached, because we know Chris preaches the gospel faithfully. They're going to hear the gospel preached. They're going to interact with other people, and they're going to be attracted to that if the Lord is calling them, out. So as they hear the gospel offered to them, if the Spirit's effectually calling them, they're going to come right in.
Yeah.
And they're not going to care that your music isn't cool. They don't care about that. They really don't. They I don't want to go to hell, not I don't want to sing hymns. That's what people are, as people are wrestling with.
That's exactly right. I want to know what the truth is. I don't want to go to hell. I want to know who God is. I want to know who and what I am.
Correct.
Right?
So, where are you going at Sovereign Grace Church? In other words, we know what direction you're going, but have you made a decision ecclesiastically? Where I'm sure that's what people want to know here. We've talked about sort of coming the whole way. You even mentioned infant baptism, which is like the last hurdle. Right?
Yeah, that was the last hurdle for us because, to some degree, I sometimes wonder if people won't struggle more with the centrality of corporate worship and the notion that elders have real authority. To some degree, some of our people already get that, but that's hard for people. But infant baptism is probably the one where it's like the one that we introduced last September. So a year ago this month, I announced to the congregation that the elders had come to this position of believing in covenant baptism or household baptism or the baptism of your children, believers and their children. And so what does that look like in the church, and why did we come to that position? We had to walk them through that. So we've spent the last year teaching in small groups that we have.
That's really wise.
Which Scott would love, the small groups. No, actually, we have small groups because we don't have anywhere to have Sunday school. Yeah. So it's the only thing we can do is people's homes. We have Bible studies with teachers.
They're great. They're just no substitute for corporate worship.
Correct. And they're not, and they need to have teachers, not group facilitators. And so we've done that in those groups. We've done that in the corporate worship service. and we've kind of led them along. We're now doing our kind of first baptism class for parents who want to have their children baptized, which our first baptism with children will be at the end of October. October 29th, the Sunday of Reformation Day. It's just landed perfectly, accidentally, not intentionally. We didn't make that choice, but so we'll do that, and then the discussion was, well, what denomination are we going to join, or what federation are we going to join? Yeah. So we narrowed it down to 3 that we thought were potentially viable in California. One was the PCA. We would be in the Pacific Presbytery. We looked at that some. The OPC, Orthodox Presbyterian Church, Southern California. Met a guy named Chris Hartshorn.
Chris.
He's just fantastic. Yeah. Really wants to plant a lot of churches.
Yeah, Chris is a great guy.
And there's some West Cal grads, Westminster, California grads who are in the OPC who are really anxious to plant churches and do some good work. And so that's like heartening, and you think, oh, that's exciting. So we've been talking with them, and then the URC we've been talking with. And so we're just...
Which might be why you're here.
Which might be why we're down at Escondido.
We can't reveal too much.
Yeah. So we're having that conversation with you all, and trying to kind of finalize that decision, hopefully in the near future, where we're headed.
And also planting churches.
Yeah. Well, I'm really keen to plant more churches. We obviously are sending out another missionary church planting couple. Actually, this Sunday will be their commissioning Sunday.
If you do one in Pismo, I might... I shouldn't say that.
Yeah. I would tell you, Central Coast.
Pismo,
Central Coast is what I'm looking at.
I'm on record.
I'm looking at it. Yeah.
I hope no one in the church gets mad.
You know,
I said that.
Yeah. Well, that is where we would like to plant. Actually, is that kind of 5 cities Central Coast area. They could probably use a plant in Santa Maria. They could use a URC in Pismo, 5 cities area. They could use a URC in San Luis Obispo. So if we were with the URC, then we're going to want to plant URCs in those places. If we're with the OPC, then we'd plant OPCs in those places. But we're really interested in seeing men who can rightly handle the word of truth, who understand what it means to preach Christ, not to get in the pulpit and show their reformed credentials, right? But to get in the pulpit and preach Christ, to hold up the law and the gospel full-throatedly in both cases, to understand the right use of those 2 words, law and gospel, in your preaching. Men who are confessionally reformed, who want to who want to bring people into reformed worship and show them, like, hey, we ascend Mount Zion together, and we hear from Christ, and this is the most exciting thing that's happening in your week. Why wouldn't you want to clamor to be here as soon as you can? So getting men who want to reach the lost people and plant churches like that, we really want to do that. So
that's very exciting.
If the Lord brings us into the URC and we can raise up men who can do that, then Pismo will be looking for a church pastor at some point.
I know a really great seminary, so we'll talk offline.
So wherever we land, that's what we want to do.
Well, we'll pray that it's clear for you. And it's been great to have you on the program today, Chad, and to hear about what the Lord's doing in Bakersfield. We have an interest with that, and Scott's here. So how could we not have fun? So I was able to bring, the doc in to.
That's right.
I was starting to run out of gas, and then he.
Yeah, you know what I said? I said, you know why he's here? He said, I can't come. I'm not. I just don't feel real well, and I'm tired. And I said, well, it is true. You're getting old. And all of a sudden, he's here because he took. He didn't like that comment.
He challenged him.
I challenged him.
He was on our officer retreat, and I nicknamed him Scott the Snark Clark. He's always got some snarky comment to make. So, Dr.
I think he's a blast.
He is.
The Central Coast is so gorgeous.
It is.
It is, isn't it?
If you listener, viewer, if you've never seen the Central Coast of California, I know
number 1 vacation spot.
When you look at the news, there's a lot of bad news about California, and there is. But there are some marvelous places. This is a huge state. It starts at just north of Mexico and goes all the way to Oregon. It's 12 hours from the top, from the bottom to the top. Is 12 hours.
It's beautiful,
and it's about 5 hours across. If you can find a road that will go east to west or west to east, it's 5 hours. It's a huge state. There's lots of different cultures, lots of different places. California's probably really 5 states.
It is,
and
especially the northern's the most challenging.
The Central Coast is a whole different place. It's just a kind
beautiful.
of it's a beautiful, magical place.
So is Humboldt County. We should think about who to send up.
We need more gospel ministers to come to California rather than, run away from California.
Yeah, exactly.
I think it's you in your article. There's 40 million people and so much cattle.
Remember the title? Arise, Nineveh, go to California. Arise, Jonah, go to California. That wretched state.
That's exactly right.
There really are millions and millions of people here who've never heard of Christ.
Yeah.
We have obviously a growing immigrant population, not just Spanish speaking, but from lots of different people groups. But obviously, Spanish is a major language in California and language group. A lot of those folks don't have any serious background in Christianity, or so they have either a Roman background or increasingly a Pentecostal background. Right. In either case, they're really disconnected from Scripture and from historic Christianity. Right. And Christ and the gospel isn't at the center of either one of those traditions, really.
So I've got a proposal. So what happens as we near, how old are you now, Chris?
I am 46.
Okay, so I'm 50. So as we close in on retirement, maybe, Chris, you and I can co-pastor a church in the Central Coast.
We'll do it.
And then Scott can be our crotchety member who tells us we're not singing enough psalms, we're not catechizing enough. We're just like, we're good, but not quite there. Yeah.
I get that every week. What are you talking about? Chris doesn't want more. That would be nothing new,
Yeah, exactly.
Chris said, hey, Sunday was great. And so Sunday was last Sunday was my Sunday in the parking lot. The usher, security team, whatnot. And that was the Sunday he picked to sing almost all psalms.
See, he tells me, he tallies these things, and I told him my percentages are high. He disagreed. So, you know what? Maybe he didn't realize that was pretty normal last week. Anyway. He doesn't agree. But anyway.
It was great.
We all have members like Scott. We all have him.
I love him. I'll take a bunch of Scots.
Absolutely.
I honestly don't remember what psalm it was, but we sang a psalm. It was in the old building, so that's how long ago. It was before COVID. We sang a psalm.
He's got it tallied somewhere.
A cappella. And it reduced a number of the members of the congregation to tears. It was one of the most powerful.
Psalm 102.
Was it Psalm 102?
It was 102 out of the Book of Psalms for singing. The Baca tune. And that tune will pull tears.
It was amazing.
I mean, you could show it to your, and it's a Psalm of Lament.
Is it really?
You will actually cry.
It was one of the most powerful spiritual experiences I've ever had, and it was.
Scott is an experientialist to some degree.
He is.
Yeah. I mean, we've always, all of our Reformed people always believed in a rich, vital spiritual life.
Absolutely. So. All right. Well, I think that's good. We've gone almost an hour. We'll have Chad back, but thanks for being here, brother.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate it.
Great to see you again.
Yeah.
It's a privilege to be here.
This will go on the Heidel blog do you want to say it again?
Yeah, heidelblog.net.
One more time?
heidelblog.net. So I will post it. Yeah, when this gets posted, I will post it there.
And then at agradio.org. So, all right. Thanks, Chad. Thanks for being here, brother.